Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the third and final community forum for Wakefield Vision 2030. We have a packed agenda today, so we're hoping to get started as soon as possible. But we do want to give a little bit of time for some more folks to join us. So that they don't miss out on the beginning of the presentation. So in the meantime, hang tight and take a little bit of a breather. If you have any questions, feel free to post those into the chat. But otherwise, we should be getting started shortly. Thanks so much. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I am going to give us a little bit more time just for some more folks to join us. We're getting some more people joining. Thanks so much for signing in for the third and final open house workshop for Wakefield Vision 2030. We really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat either now or during the presentation. But you will have the chance to talk in more detail with your fellow meeting attendees in the breakout rooms. So I'm going to give us a few more minutes just to make sure that we have everyone who wants to be here before we get started. So hang tight. Thanks so much. All right, I think we should get started. So I will hand it off to Councillor Chimes to get us going. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Christian, very much. And thank you, everyone. Good evening, Wakefield. And welcome to our third and final virtual public forum for Wakefield Vision 2030. As Kristen mentioned, I'm Town Councillor Jonathan Chines, and it's been really exciting to be part of this process over the last couple of months, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion tonight. So what Vision 2030 is an effort to develop and document a set of shared goals and values for our community that will help us guide both planning and policy decisions in the future. And for anyone who's joined us for the first two virtual public forums, tonight's session will be a little bit different. In the first two forums, we focused much more on ideas and concept and visions around sort of the physical space in Wakefield. Tonight, we're focusing on a couple of different topics. And so again, I'm excited about that discussion. I do have, before we kick it off, just a couple of people that I do want to thank for making this all possible. First of all, a big thank you to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which has been supporting this effort both through a grant as well as through their human capital that they've brought. And so I'm particularly grateful to Carlos Montañez and Christian Brandt, who are here tonight and who helped put this all together. Similarly, in Town Hall, Jen McDonald, our communications manager, and Erin Kakinda, our community and economic development director, have done an extraordinary amount of work making this all happen. So thank you to Jen and Erin. And we've also had a lot of support from a number of folks who serve on different boards here in Wakefield and are members of the community. And you'll hear from a number of them tonight, but just I want to highlight a few of them right now. Catherine McDonald, Chris Barrett, Benny Wheat, Mike Boudreau, Bill Spalding, Catherine Dingra, Anthony Amatucci, Amy Forsyth, Adam Rogers, and Anthony Guardia, as well as Susan Jepson. Thank you all for volunteering your time. This really couldn't have happened without all of you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carlos to kick things off and get us started.
All right, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Councillor Chines, for those opening remarks. As mentioned, town is contracted with MAPC in order to lead the community process to obtain input for Vision 2030. I am Carlos Montañez, the project manager for the Wakefield Vision 2030 process. I'm also joined tonight by Christian Brandt from our MAPC consultant team. And as you can see, we're also acknowledging members from the advisory committee. As you can see their names on the slide. All right, thank you for joining us this Monday evening for our final workshop. Before we continue, we just want to provide a brief reminder that this is a public online community forum that's being recorded, and it will be shared online for the benefit of those who are unable to attend. This visioning workshop is aimed at gathering collective ideas and having possible next steps in place for when a sense of normalcy returns. Welcome to the third and final of the 3 workshops. Tonight we'll address 4 visioning planning topics. Community visioning is an aspirational community brainstorming opportunity so we can all pause and evaluate where the town is currently at this moment and where community members would like to be in the future. It can help to identify common goals and also shared values, as well as help frame more clearly future collective decision-making at future town board and committee meetings. This online workshop comes in 2 parts. This real-time Zoom event that we're currently logged into, as well as a part 2 online open house survey that will be live for 3 weeks starting tonight, June 21st, until July 12th. The 3-week survey is another opportunity for community participation and input at the convenience of Wakefield community members. Now we'll provide a little bit more background about us and the process. As the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, MAPC strives to help communities supplement their local capacity, brainstorm ideas, and attempt to find solutions to common issues that cross municipal boundaries. We are, as I mentioned, the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, and we function like a public consultancy as well as a resource. MAPC is also a mission-based agency, and on the slide are a few excerpts from our mission statement. We promote smart growth, regional collaboration. We also focus on equity and diversity and in addressing community concerns that affect people from a variety of backgrounds across many communities in Greater Boston. Wakefield is part of MAPC's North Suburban Planning Council subregion. This subregion consists of representatives from 9 neighboring communities north of Metro Boston. The committee meets regularly to address common issues and attempt to pull together collective ideas. Community visioning allows for brainstorming of community ideas. It synthesizes community input into consensus goals and ultimately a vision statement. Those goals and the vision statement can be used to help community members reflect on priorities and make decisions together that are grounded in some form of common understanding. It also involves considering what could be if existing conditions and practices were slightly different. Tonight's meeting is the last of 3 public workshops. We will discuss the final 4 visioning topics tonight. This public forum is immediately followed by a final 3-week-long survey. The forum is intended to be informative and to spark a discussion amongst your fellow participants. We find it beneficial for your fellow community members to hear what each other's ideas are before taking the survey. At the end of tonight's meeting, we will then ask all Wakefield community members to take the survey so we can record your individual input. We will use your responses to start to help identify consensus goals, ideas, and help craft a vision for that plan report document. Tonight's part 1 of the open house. We will start with a few general informational slides before we spend the rest of the meeting addressing each of the 4 topics in the following format. We will have some brief informational slides on each topic. Then we'll also have some community co-presenters give their personal experience on the topic before breaking out into smaller discussion groups for approximately 25 minutes. The first topic will be slightly longer than the remaining 3 topics. And at the conclusion of all 4 topics, then we'll conclude with brief closing remarks from our municipal project team. The next slides will highlight the 4 visioning topics and also provide a few sample questions and possible ideas to spark the discussion. Then when we're all done with this Zoom event, we'll kindly ask everyone to please take the online survey during the next 3 weeks. Please share the link on the screen with your family, friends, and neighbors. Any Wakefield member can take the survey even if they did not participate in tonight's Zoom meeting event. The following is a very brief overview of the town with additional demographic data appearing later with the first visioning topic. Wakefield's an established suburban town 10 miles north of Boston. Given that Wakefield is a mature community that is approaching physical build out, new opportunities for community growth and economic growth are likely to occur with flexibility and creativity towards redevelopment infill opportunities. As you can see from the historical population chart between the years 1850 and 2010, the town's population has remained relatively stable with modest growth since 1960. The town's educational attainment levels are comparable with Middlesex County. The map highlights Wakefield's business districts, neighborhoods, and open spaces. In the center is Wakefield's downtown area between its 2 prominent lakes. The areas in red are the retail business areas. The areas in purple are zoned for industrial commercial uses, and the areas in green show the open spaces. You can also see the 2 commuter rail locations identified with the small T icon. Now that we have that brief background info, we're going to get into our 4 visioning topics, which are diversity and inclusion, the health, safety, and resiliency of vulnerable communities. The 3rd topic, which is promoting lifelong learning and community development. And the last one, which is fostering community spirit and volunteerism. The following slides will address our first topic regarding diversity and inclusion, which will consider how to provide access and options for community members of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. Before we get into the content, our MAPC Community Engagement Specialist, Christian Brandt, will offer some guidelines for our community discussion.
Sorry, my computer froze. All right, so one of the things that we like to do before we have sort of deeper discussions is go over some group agreements. And so I just have a few listed on the screen. And these I think will help guide the conversations that we'll be having in each of the breakout rooms today. So the first one is that acknowledging that everyone is here to learn, everyone brings a different kind of expertise, and everybody is contributing a different kind of energy to the space that you're in, virtual or otherwise. We also feel like it's important to share the lesson that you've learned, but not necessarily the story. What that means is just unless somebody has given you express permission, just being mindful that the breakout rooms are a place for you to talk about your own experiences. And so we want to help keep those stories confidential. If you're somebody like me who likes to talk a lot, then this applies to you. This is a take space, make space rule. So this just means that if you find yourself engaging a lot in the conversation, think about stepping back to leave space for some other folks to chime in as well. Oops, ouch, whoa is about sort of acknowledging when you might have said something that sort of got under someone else's skin. That is the oops. The ouch is acknowledging when something has gotten under your skin, and the whoa is just taking a little bit of a breather to sort of reflect on those things in the moment. We know that sometimes these conversations aren't the most comfortable thing in the world, and so it's just really important to remember that there's going to be some level of discomfort that comes along with some of these topics that we're talking about today. And then the last thing, which I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with, is just leading with I statements. So saying, I feel this way, or I think blah, blah, blah. So that, I think, are just some guidelines for you as you go into these discussions today. And also, Mike Boudreau reminded me that, just to remind you that the breakout sessions are not recorded. So the main sessions are, of course, recorded, but the breakout sessions are not recorded.
Thank you, Christian, for those guidelines. For our first topic, I find it useful to define terms sometimes in order to ensure that we all have like a better understanding of a topic for group discussion and why the topic is relevant to community planning. As part of Wakefield's community visioning for planning process, the town is considering how to strive to be an inclusive community that welcomes the participation of individuals from different backgrounds, with different abilities, of different ages, and in different life phases and stages. There are numerous benefits to fostering diverse communities, workplaces, and organizations. These include learning from different perspectives that can not only provide individual growth, but also deliver new insights into enhanced problem solving by considering the experience of people with different backgrounds. An exchange of diverse insights and perspectives can also elevate the greater community's overall cultural competency. Cultural competency is the ability to understand and interact effectively with people from other cultures. It is important for building effective relationships that minimize misunderstandings. The development of cross-cultural skills has been a key aspect of psychological thinking and practice for over 5 decades. Lastly, moving towards a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive community helps to distance oneself from past greater societal era practices of segmenting society by difference. As an example, consider the change in women's rights from the ability to vote to moving away from homemaking and becoming part of the workforce, as exemplified by the photo image of the 1970 show Mary Tyler Moore. Another example includes how there were various periods in history of strong anti-Catholicism against different migrant groups, such as French Canadians working in New England factories. Our final example relates to the 1960s civil rights struggles of Americans with different physical abilities that led to the Americans with Disability Act for greater inclusion and participation in society. In terms of race and ethnicity, Wakefield is 90% white, 5% Latin American, 2% Asian American, and 1% African American. The town is 5% to 19% less diverse than Middlesex County and the immediate surrounding communities within the subregion. When compared to greater Metro Boston, Wakefield is 24% less diverse. The town has a median household income of approximately $95,000 but there is a 54% difference between family and non-family household incomes as shown on the slide. Other data sets provide insights into the town's demographics. When looking at foreign-born and naturalized citizens, Wakefield is 5% less diverse than immediate surrounding communities. And it is 12 to 13% less diverse than Middlesex County and Metro Boston. Of its households that speak another language at home, 2% of Wakefield's households are linguistically isolated, meaning that they do not command working proficiency in English, leaving them potentially vulnerable to not fully participating in community life. Lastly, self-reported data from the American Community Survey estimates show the various national ancestries of Wakefield residents, with Irish and Italian Catholics being the most reported. It is worth noting that there is not perfect correspondence between the various race, ethnicity, and national origin data sets. When looking at accessibility issues of the town's residents, 10% of Wakefield's residents have physical accessibility challenges, including the ability to move around town, as well as being able to live independently. Other reported issues include hearing, cognitive, and vision difficulties. Wakefield residents are fortunate enough to not have to entirely rely on the use of single-use person vehicles for their commutes, with almost 1/5 of residents using a combination of carpooling, public transportation, or walking. So there is an opportunity there to improve and expand mobility options as well as the transportation networks to help mobility challenged residents. Here we have some of the top industries in town that provide the most locally based jobs in Wakefield. There are a total of 15,712 people who work in town. It is worth noting that the healthcare and social assistance industry sector employs 5% fewer workers than the county. When the town is considering changes to its local regulations on businesses and development, it should consider how those regulations might be impacting the ability to allow certain types of businesses, services, and employment opportunities for its residents. On the right, we can see that the town's approximately 15,000 locally based jobs. 10% of the workers are town residents, and 90% are commuters coming into Wakefield to work. 16% of workers coming into town are from Boston, Lynn, Peabody, and Stoneham. It is worth noting that approximately half of Wakefield's residents work out of town. This healthy exchange of community members moving freely to and from each other's communities for work and recreational opportunities is also relevant to allowing housing options for oneself as well as others, whether it be in the present, as well as for an unforeseen future or a change in personal preferences. When it comes to housing costs, Wakefield's single-family homes are 5% higher than the county, with a median single-family home price of $562,000. The median gross rent is 12% lower than Middlesex County, with a median rent of approximately $1,300. Almost 1/3 of the town's households are cost burdened, meaning that they pay more than 1/3 of their monthly income on housing, leaving them potentially vulnerable to not meeting other household needs. When looking at renters versus homeowners, 44% of renters are cost burdened versus 1/4 of the town's homeowners, which are also cost burdened. Circling back to the topic of diversity and inclusion for clarity's sake, diversity can be defined as the goal or the quality of having a broad range of people that represent the entirety of the human experience. This includes a spectrum of economic classes, races, religious beliefs, cultures, abilities, ages, sex, gender, and orientation. When we think of the term inclusion, one way it can be described is when one creates a welcoming and respectful environment that allows for wide participation. and one that is open to new ideas, contributions, and customs. Such an environment benefits individuals as well as the entire community. From a community planning standpoint, diversity and inclusion matters as an overarching goal for a more equitable community. In order to do so, community planners have been reevaluating past historical, national, and regional practices that have unevenly distributed benefits to some and burdens and barriers to others. The removal of barriers includes allowing more options for transportation, as well as more varied housing options. Also, access to more resources and opportunities for education and workforce training to allow people to be able to make a livelihood that is dignified for the human spirit, as well as good for the overall community. The removal of housing and transportation barriers can also allow residents the ability to be able to age in the same community that they grew up in without being priced out, or not being able to have other options for downsizing or for a change in one's own physical abilities over time. The diagram shows a variety of different housing options that exist between detached single-family homes and mid-rise residential developments. This is often referred to as missing middle housing in many communities, as well as in the planning and architecture fields. The town's approved housing production plan highlights there has been slow housing production and less housing diversity, and that there are changing needs for an aging population that is resulting in fewer affordable options to be able to age in place with low maintenance property options in town. Now we turn to some possible ideas to foster connections with people from other backgrounds and how to bridge gaps. Here we have two examples of essentially an intergenerational exchange program between nursing home residents in Seattle and retirees in the UK with preschoolers. In the Seattle example, the preschool is physically housed in an area of the nursing home. In the Bristol and Nottingham, UK examples, the retirees live in their own homes in a retirement community, but they regularly visit the preschoolers in their own classrooms separately. In both instances, there is value in combating loneliness and anxiety due to unnecessary seclusion and confinement of older members of society who have a lifetime of personal experience, wisdom, and joy that they can share with the children, who in turn can benefit from the insights and the storytelling of their elders. The success of the UK examples has been widely documented in an award-winning reality documentary that has been replicated in Australia, Israel, and beyond. It's called Old People's Home for 4-Year-Olds, if you're curious to look it up online. Another idea for bridging gaps and connecting with others includes an organization and international movement called the Human Library. It started in Denmark in the year 2000 and facilitates the interaction of people from different backgrounds who normally would not meet each other. The goal is to address prejudices. Since the Copenhagen Human Library in 2000, others have opened up in Salt Lake City, Utah, Lismore, Australia, and Budapest, Hungary. They do not necessarily need to be housed in a dedicated facility and can be volunteer-based, community-run organizations with also online virtual presences. Online how-to guides are available and on how to establish a community's own human library, should there be interest in that. The Copenhagen Human Library operates with the tagline of "Unjudge Someone." It has been featured in The Economist magazine, and the article provides examples of human books that can be borrowed. The image on the right shows a few examples, including refugees, stammerers, people with schizophrenia, etc. Another example we have of an idea for connecting with others includes establishing a multicultural day for celebrating different cultures in one's own community. The Canadian and Australian governments have both established official days that have taken root in society and are celebrated and acknowledged in workplaces. The Australian version has been branded as Harmony Day in order to emphasize its purpose within the name itself. Wakefield Public Schools already celebrates an international night in a similar spirit or vein. And were there to be interest in the greater Wakefield community, perhaps the Wakefield Public Schools example could serve as further inspiration. Likewise, perhaps the national ancestry data shown on the slide could also serve as inspiration for this and could be further expanded upon to be more inclusive. Perhaps as a part of the community discussion, the concepts of cultural pluralism and melting pots versus salad bowls could be explored. Cultural pluralism builds upon these last two concepts by emphasizing the right to preserve heritage as a positive attribute toward building a diverse society and emphasizes appreciation over tolerance. Now that we've framed the topic, the Vision 2030 project team has partnered with several community stakeholders to share their local and personal perspectives and insights into the topics. Our first community co-presenter, I believe, will be Benny Wheat from the Wakefield Human Rights Commission.
Thanks, Carlos. Hi, everybody. My name is Benny Wheat. I'm the chair of the Human Rights Commission here in Wakefield. And thank you also, Carlos, for the definition and kind of background information about diversity and inclusion. I'll add, in terms of thinking about inclusion, I like to frame this idea around doing things that are going to build spaces that are inviting and accessible to people who have traditionally been excluded. So people who have been marginalized, who have been kept out of spaces of power and decision-making. So in particular, to me, inclusion has a focus on kind of balancing the scales of historical exclusion. So I just wanted to add that piece in. And some ways to think about this, like some examples of what this might look like. I picked two examples here, but for every facet of diversity that you can imagine, there are examples that we could plug in there, so race, religion, gender identity, ability, country of origin, first language, like anything you can imagine about a person. There are ways that you could create an atmosphere that is more inclusive. But a couple of examples that I'm throwing out just to kind of frame what that might mean are, for example, interpretation services available at public meetings so that anyone who isn't confident enough in English to be able to really partake or really impact the conversation and bring their thoughts and input would still be able to participate if there was interpretation available. So that's an example of how to create a more inclusive space. Or childcare, somebody who doesn't have other childcare options would not be able to partake in a lot of public spaces, public meetings, decision-making forums, anything like that. Another example that I have up here is culturally tailored resources. This is like a little bit of a crossover into the next section about caring for vulnerable community members. But for example, if you have folks who are struggling with mental health or substance abuse, having resources for them that are actually specific to them. So if you have a person from South Asia who's struggling with mental health issues, the resources that are going to work for them might be different from a person who's from Central America versus a person of European descent, all these things. So thinking about culturally tailored resources that we make available to everybody in our community to make them able to live full and connected lives. In thinking about the existing conditions in Wakefield, when I was kind of thinking this through and how to put it, to me, it is both and, meaning when I interact with a lot of folks in Wakefield, I think there's a strong commitment to diversity and increasing diversity and inclusion in our town. But also, we're still grappling with the historical exclusion that has taken place here. And is still taking place in some ways. You know, I kind of like did a little survey of a bunch of people when I was trying to come up with the content for these slides. And, you know, unfortunately, people still experience poor treatment or exclusion based on immigration status or having a disability or experiencing homelessness or being a person of color and other things like that. So it's kind of like a striving, but also a grappling with this history that we and everybody in America, I think, grapples with. And it's hard also to put a label on like what is the current status of our diversity and inclusion. You know, you can look at the stats that Carlos provided to us about different races that are represented in town, country of origin, language spoken at home. There's some data out there, and that's really helpful. There's also not a lot of data, if you really think about it, you know, like there's not data on gender identity, sexuality, mental health status, ability. Like there's tons of things that we don't necessarily have an easy way to assess how we're doing or where we're at. One thing that I was thinking about, if you really are specifically thinking of access to decision-making power and the ability to participate and influence the town, is how diverse are our decision-making bodies? How diverse are the various commissions and committees in town? How diverse is our various elected bodies? Things like that. I don't know that data about that really exists, but that's a thing I think to think about.
Great, thank you very much for that. So I think now we're going to move to, sorry, Benny, you had another slide here. I forgot to advance it for you. I don't know if there's something.
This is just basically a list of things, just saying like there's a lot of stuff going on in town around celebrating diversity and things like that. The Wakefield Human Rights Commission puts on a lot of programming, both recurring events and one-time events. And then there's a bunch of other organizations in town that also do a lot of stuff. Like we had the Black Student Union put on a Black Lives Matter march last year. Chabad of the North Shore does the menorah lighting on the Common. We've had different vigils for different types of events that have taken place. There are the Black Lives Matter standouts at the UU Church. There's a bunch, like there's a lot of stuff that's happening in town to kind of bring this to the forefront. So I wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on, Christian. We're going to do our breakout groups.
Yes. So really quickly, for those of you who have experienced this before, or who have not experienced this before, excuse me, you'll get an invitation to a breakout room on your screen. You do have to click yes. And in those breakout rooms, there will be some facilitation provided by our lovely committee and town staff and MAPC. And we will be in those for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're a little bit behind, so trying to make up some time. And then we will come back to hear about health, safety, and vulnerable communities. So I just posted the questions that you'll be discussing in the chat, and I'm opening the breakout rooms now.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us back, and over to you, Carlos.
Thank you everyone again. That was really good and short as always. Let's see, so now we're moving on to our second topic. I need to reshare my screen, right? Is it on? So our second topic tonight is the health, resiliency, and safety of Wakefield's vulnerable populations. Can you see my screen? Oh, you can. Okay.
No, not yet.
How about now? All right. So So yeah, our second topic tonight will address Wakefield's vulnerable populations. This topic dives down into the well-being and inclusion of vulnerable groups of people within Wakefield. Vulnerable populations are defined as communities and groups who are at a higher risk for poor health. These groups are at a higher risk for poor health due to obstacles that they experience due to obstacles and barriers to access a variety of political, socioeconomic, and environmental resources, as well as challenges to disabilities or chronic illnesses. The American Journal of Managed Care offers some examples of vulnerable populations. These include the uninsured, minorities, the elderly, the immunocompromised, those with severe mental illness, and even some rural residents who physically are distant from necessary healthcare resources. The health domain issues cover physical, psychological, and social challenges. Some of these include high-risk mothers and infants, the chronically ill, those with substance abuse issues, even those with ADHD, people in abusive families, and even refugees. Presently, there are various local and regional organizations that provide resources and services to support vulnerable populations. The organizations shown on the right are a few examples, and listed on the left are a few examples of services and resources that they offer. Some possible ideas for supporting existing services as well as expanding them or exploring others include residential services and community-centered housing for the disabled, with an emphasis on empowering independent living. Employment support services, including partnering with local employers and offering transitional housing, transitional employment. Dual recovery treatment services for those struggling with not only with one or more conditions or issues. Organized social and sports activities to help with wellness and emotional well-being. Stigma campaigns to encourage the access and use of services by people who need them, but who may be shy or feel ashamed in seeking help. And things like sober housing and support groups. Lastly, regarding the town's recently completed hazard mitigation plan, as well as the municipal vulnerability preparedness plan, both recommend creating an inventory of the town's vulnerable populations with a focus on providing emergency support services during severe storms and heat waves. These extreme events can cause power outages and put seniors and those dependent on medical devices at risk. Other recommendations include cooling centers, transportation support services, the distribution of crank flashlights at regular town committee meetings, and enhancing emergency shelter options during these events. This one's a short topic. So now that we've framed this evening's second topic, we will have two community co-presenters offer their local perspectives and experience on the topic. So with that, we'll have Catherine Dingra and Anthony Amaducci talk about their perspectives on this. So take it away.
All right, thanks, Carlos. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Catherine Dingra, and I work for the town in the health department, and I run our substance abuse prevention work and direct the Wakefield Unified Prevention Coalition. So through my work in the health department, it's great. We have a robust health department in Wakefield, really focused on public health, education, and prevention. And because we manage the Wake Up Coalition, it really brings over 40 residents, parents, law enforcement, business owners, school professionals, and concerned residents who are dedicated to reducing substance use and increasing access to mental health care in our community. But what it also does is it creates this web of relationships that deal with all of the risk and protective factors we're talking about right now. We interface with a lot of the groups that are mentioned on this page and folks that are presenting later on. And it really helps our community stay healthy, well, and resilient. In addition, our health department has a regional collaboration with the Mystic Valley Public Health Coalition, which is 6 local communities working together to coordinate response to public health issues, everything from rats to our recent COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the other kind of community assets that I'd like to emphasize and highlight is the Wakefield Food Pantry. Last year, we served over 615 households in our community, and it really has a strong reputation as one of the best well-run pantries in Greater Boston. Our police department is really an asset as well. We have a reputation as a model department for supporting vulnerable citizens. We have a full-time family resource officer. We also have a full-time mental health clinician through Elliott. So this year, just to give you a sense of what we're dealing with this year, our clinician has seen a 75% increase in service demands from last fiscal year. Wakefield PD also has a part-time recovery coach through Elliott. Our recovery coach has supported over 250 individuals and families struggling with substance use issues since coming on board in 2018. We also have a part-time domestic violence advocate with Respond who supports Wakefield families and also works with the court system. So currently, 34% of our Wakefield police officers are trained members of the crisis intervention team. That requires about 40 hours of training. In addition, all Wakefield police officers are trained in mental health first aid. A few other things I'd like to highlight. We obviously, as Carlos pointed out, we have multiple human service agencies that have a presence in Wakefield. They provide outpatient treatment, day programs, and group homes. And that's something kind of along the line on our kind of gaps in programs or opportunities. There's a lot of stigma around the group homes and sober living in Wakefield, and that's something I feel like is an opportunity. The BB library really serves as an essential support for our vulnerable residents. For many, the library may be their only source to access computer and the internet. It also helps significantly with social isolation. And librarians are really key. They're knowledgeable of our community services and they connect residents to these resources. Obviously, this last year, our Council on Aging was a shining star in really reaching out and getting creative and reaching those our senior citizens. And you talk to any senior resident, Judy Luciano is a kind of a rock star to them. We've got great veterans and housing. And then we also have something a lot of people might not be aware of. We have this civilian emergency response team, and it's a group of community volunteers, including medical and non-medical residents. And this is the team that proved to be essential when we were running the vaccination clinics this winter. We had thousands of volunteer hours making sure that those clinics ran smoothly. It's not listed here, but our institutions of faith also provide an essential safety net for our residents and provide services from free clothing to free community meals. And those are a lot of the cultural hubs that service like maybe our Brazilian community and some of the smaller cultural communities in Wakefield. I'm going to turn it over to Anthony, who is going to talk about youth engagement and some gaps in programming and opportunities.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Christian and Carlos, for setting this all up. So my name is Anthony Matucci. I am the Secretary of the Youth Council. And just to talk a little bit about the Youth Council and what we do, we were established last year in April 2020, and we're sort of just devoted to providing youth members of the Wakefield community with a platform to voice their concerns, their thoughts, and their opinions about local matters. And because of that, the Youth Council does is sort of required to address a variety of different issues in different areas. And that's sort of the reason why we have our liaison positions, in which every one of our members is a liaison to a specific committee, council, organization within the town, where they interact and sort of create a connection with that organization through the Youth Council, which allows us to have sort of better awareness for certain issues within town, and which then allows us to have the better tools and knowledge to address those issues. that may affect youth members of the community. Sort of related in tandem with the Youth Council is the Youth Action Team, which has been well established within the town for many years. They're also associated with the Wake Up Coalition. The team itself consists of 10 Youth Action Team leaders and also 60 additional youth involved in the Galvin and high school action team clubs. They're a group of diverse teens who are really great and just work towards creating just a healthy environment for themselves and their peers. A great analogy they sort of like to use is kind of growing positive flowers, sort of promoting positive mental health prevention practices, and just building a positive school culture and relationship between their peers, while also shrinking those kind of negative weeds or negative health practices such as just youth vaping, binge drinking, and also underage marijuana usage. Transitioning over to gaps in programming and opportunities, one of the most major of these gaps being mental health, in the sense that mental health demands have exceeded resources, and that was previously emphasized by Catherine, in the sense that there has been a dramatic increase in the need for these resources. And an example of recently the Youth Council's efforts to sort of close this gap was through a recent survey a few months ago that was distributed to students at Wakefield High School. The survey was created by one of our really great members, Alyssa Toppy, and it really allowed the Youth Council to have this sort of eye-opening moment and to see all this data. And some areas with regard to mental health during the pandemic were somewhat positive, but others were definitely something concerning. So through that data, we've been able to post resources on our social media page and sort of interact with other mental health organizations throughout the state in our meetings, in order to essentially just be better able to address this issue of mental health, which is becoming more increasingly relevant at the local, but also state and national level. Moving on to our next point, we have the increase in demands for middle area levels of care and transitional services. That's sort of a mouthful, but the best way to describe that is by sort of describing high and low levels of care. A high level of care would be considered just hospitalization or an inpatient treatment, while low level care are just services, care and services that for just patient treatment on its own. And so kind of combining those two ideas, there's sort of that middle level care that is sort of at a shortage at this current time. And another major gap is just sort of the stigma regarding accessing food and social services. And this is sort of just a nature of us as humans. We're sort of naturally kind of unable to sort of just say that we need help at times, and sort of we almost in a sense need help to say that we need help. So definitely eliminating that stigma in order to also eradicate that aversion towards needing certain food and social services is definitely a necessity in closing that gap. Another gap is in Wakefield is just the lack of a homeless shelter. The closest shelter is in Lynn, but unfortunately that is sort of hard to access, especially through public transportation. There is a recently opened warming center in Malden, but that's only obviously available a few months during the winter to provide homeless individuals with the opportunity to sort of warm themselves from the cold throughout the winter. So there is sort of a gap there in providing homeless individuals with opportunities for shelter. And beyond that, there's also a gap in sort of in the need of developing a better understanding of services and creating a social service information hub. Many residents still are unaware of the services available and how to access basic need and social services. And I would say a big step in the right direction with regard to this gap and closing it is updating the town website, which Jennifer McDonald has done an absolutely wonderful job with doing. And that has definitely cleared out a lot of the inability for Wakefield residents to be able to access maybe certain minutes for meetings, or just be able to have a general awareness of certain events and around the town and services that are provided throughout the town. So Jennifer McDonald's definitely done an amazing job with being able to close that gap in particular. And on to sort of the final point is just the need for translations and immigrant services, and also due to language barriers. Data is in Wakefield provide that there is a growing population of ESL residents in Wakefield. And because of that, it's certainly important to sort of try to alleviate that increasing gap in the need for health and social services for these individuals who are still attempting to develop their English language skills in the school system. So that's sort of everything on community assets and also gaps in programming opportunities in Wakefield.
All right. Thank you, Anthony and Catherine, for those perspectives on the topic. I think, right, we're now moving into our breakout groups.
Yep. So same, you know the deal. You'll get a notification on your screen and you have to accept. So I'm going to open those breakout rooms in just a second. All right, so Carlos, ready to kick us off on our third topic.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that discussion. Can people see my screen this time? We're good? Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so our third topic tonight is promoting the development of the community through lifelong learning. Lifelong learning involves the voluntary pursuit of knowledge beyond childhood education for personal or professional reasons. This can include formal education seeking at a school, as well as informal trainings on the job or elsewhere, and also self-directed readings or programs of instruction. Lifelong learning also includes a subset concept of continuing adult education. Some examples include community college, online learning, workforce training, ESL or GED programs, or the pursuit of languages and the humanities and arts. There is a Japanese concept called ikigai, which encourages the exploration of one's own reason for being and personal satisfaction. The Venn diagram shows various overlapping areas where one can pursue knowledge for different reasons, and how sometimes one can also strategically overlap two or more to fit for different personal or professional edification purposes, for example. Allowing, supporting, and encouraging resources for lifelong learning matters because it can help with community development. In addition to the personal benefits of building new skills, increasing wisdom, or increasing self-confidence, lifelong learning can also help to build a stronger and more resilient local community. The advancement of numerous individuals can in turn also improve the well-being of the greater community. Community development is a related concept to the sometimes more often mentioned economic development subject matter. Community development focuses more on the intangible social well-being of society. It encourages empowerment with skills and knowledge to access and unlock resources that in turn can allow people to earn a livelihood, as opposed to experiencing barriers to self-empowerment. Community development also includes wide, inclusive public participation and activism for all members to collectively shape policies that affect themselves and everyone. Now that we've framed the third topic, we will now have three local community co-presenters briefly speak 3 to 5 minutes on their perspective on the topic before we again break out into smaller discussion groups.
First up is Anthony Guardia and Adam Rogers from the Boys and Girls Club.
No, hi, everybody. Thank you for having us. I'm going to start and I'll be brief. I know we're running a little late now. But, you know, I just want to talk to you about what the Boys and Girls Clubs do. You know, our mission is to help all young people, especially those who need us most, reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. We've been in Stoneham and Wakefield, Stoneham specifically since 1973. We serve about 300 children a day. We operate 2 clubhouses, 4 licensed after-school programs, 2 teen centers, and an outdoor pool. Recently, we've been investing in capital and staff at all levels. You probably, knock on wood, or at least I hope you've seen our growth over the past few years. This includes investment in STEAM, investments in social work programs like SPURT and food insecurity programs, working with people on the autism spectrum, and support for grandparents raising again and recent immigrants. We've been trying to do this and create the whole social safety net from infant to adult. And we've been doing this really through building a series of partnerships and identifying gaps. Now, when I logged on, Christian here asked me to be brief, and my friends who know me who are here know that is not my forte. If I could, I'll go for 40 minutes and not stop. So I'm gonna hand it over to Adam to talk about partnerships and gaps so I don't keep you all night.
Thanks, Anthony. So we get to talk about the having fun part of the recreation and community development and that. So one of the things we really wanted to highlight is the amount of recreation that is available to adults and to young people and everybody in the community. Our Wakefield Recreation Department, Quantified Yacht Club, youth sports leagues, and adult sports league. There's a lot of stuff going on in our community, and that's all great, and it definitely brings people together. One of the things people don't necessarily think about when they think of community development is likely your first interaction with other people who live in your community is through a recreational program, whether it's for yourself or your child's first, swim class, or your child's first trip to the soccer game or something. So really is the first place that a lot of new people or a lot of families moving into Wakefield sort of meet their community and meet that. And so we do, part of the gaps that we do see is where that's not available locally, whether, there's something, whether it's a facility or whether programmatically there's not something available locally. And if you see on the slides, the disassociation created where the family bonds with the activity and with the people in that activity, but not necessarily with the community. So they don't feel like they're part of the community because I'm not really part of the community. I'm taking my kid to skating lessons in Reading, or I'm not really part of the community. My kid takes swimming lessons, but it's in another community. So that's something that we see as a gap whenever that happens. It's an opportunity lost to build community around recreation or sports or just having fun with each other. And I guess am I throwing it to Catherine?
Yes, that'd be great.
Unmuted, is that right? Can you hear me?
Yes, good to go.
Great. Okay. I am Catherine McDonald. I'm the director at BB Library. And as a librarian, I've seen over the years how easy it is to overlook the potential that value that a library can play in its community as a community resource. And I think it's because people view libraries through the lens of their own unique experience. The last time you were there, whether or not you use a library, whether you used it with your children or you just went in to have a notary done, you may not see the large picture of everything that it can possibly do. So I'm pleased that this forum will allow you to consider possible roles for the library in ways that will enhance the quality of life for all of Wakefield residents. And on the slide, you can see in the center is BB's mission statement: to engage our community in lifelong learning that builds knowledge and promotes understanding. And that was designed to be very broad and flexible. And in a nutshell, the library provides access to resources and information, and it provides support to evaluate and use that information. So as I was looking at the topics here tonight, and as I have been listening in the breakout rooms, I'm continually seeing potential roles for the library in almost everything I hear. And I would like you all to be able to do that as well. And I think there are three things to keep in mind that will help you do that. And one is that libraries serve everyone, and that is everyone, no matter what you own, no matter where you live or don't live, whatever your ability, we serve everyone who crosses the threshold. And more importantly, the patron or the user of the library defines the service that they need. You don't come in to get what we're giving you. You come in and we help you find what you need. The second thing is that libraries evolve. So when BB was built in 1922, you could not even wander the stacks. And in the intervening years, we've, technology has become a thing. We've had all different kinds of formats that we've adapted to. And now we really focus on adult programming and helping adults through programs, not just through their own personal reading, but to actually be in the building or now on Zoom and learning things that way. The third thing is that libraries partner. And we have worked with town departments and commissions, nonprofits, businesses and individuals, and we do together build knowledge and promote understanding. So the library in 2030 will be a reflection of whatever Wakefield's needs are, and it will be the people of the community who decide what they want that library to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to do it again.
Yeah. So I'm going to post some facilitation questions in the chat like I've been doing previously. And I am going to open the breakout rooms right now. All right, over to you, Carlos.
Let me do this one more time. Share screen, slide. Okay. All right, so thank you for that discussion. And I did take Sylvia's last comment, which got cut off in our breakout group, so never fear. Our fourth and last for tonight is fostering community spirit and volunteerism. Initially, I thought to myself whether I actually needed to define a concept as simple as volunteerism. But in doing so, I discovered a few nuanced examples that I hadn't considered myself. So for the sake of common understanding, here we go. All right, so fostering volunteerism helps communities to thrive. It's the use of volunteer labor, especially in community services, where one volunteers time for educational, charitable, or other worthwhile activities. The word's etymology comes from the Latin voluntarius, which means willing or of one's own choice. There are different types of volunteer activities. Some are skill-based, such as medicine, education, volunteering in resource-poor schools, or emergency rescue volunteering. Other examples include service learning programs where students can earn educational credits, corporate-sponsored volunteering, environmental cleanup efforts, volunteering on local town boards and committees, or even more prescriptive and regulated social welfare volunteering at institutions like hospitals. On the right are a few examples of local and regional organizations that encourage and support volunteer programs. According to best readily available data from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics, approximately 63 million people volunteered in the US in 2014. That is approximately 1/4 of the population over the age of 15. Of those 63 million, 1/3 were involved in volunteering in some religious or place of worship capacity, and 1/4 did youth or educational service volunteering, and 14% did so in a social or community service capacity. This topic's really short as well. So now that we've framed why the topic matters, we will have our last set of community co-presenters share their local insights. We're going to start with Mike Ugo.
Sure. So just real quickly, a few of my volunteer experiences. So when I moved to Wakefield, initially I started volunteering on the sports side, came from a athletic background, I guess. So I started with the Soccer Association. I was on the board for 20 years, just retired recently, but I had coached for a bit longer than that. Also did hockey board and coaching for a long time, and lacrosse for a little. Then I kind of branched out into other non-athletic sorts of volunteer activities, the food pantry, and my apologies, I've been balancing that back and forth tonight because we have our board meeting and annual meeting, so I've had to step out for that as well. And I found that to be very enlightening. As much as it was great teaching kids how to kick a ball and shoot a puck, helping in some small way to feed people, to provide that basic necessity in life has been incredibly gratifying for me. I've also been on the Scholarship Foundation board for about 4 years now. We just gave out $730,000 to Wakefield kids to assist them with higher education beyond high school. So that's amazing for such a small community that we're able to do that. Catherine Dingra and I are on the senior night committee. So that's kind of a post-prom event that's put on to hopefully provide a safe environment for the kids. I recently joined the school committee, which has been a rather interesting ride over the past year, as I'm sure many of you can imagine, in that regard too. So that was a bit of baptism by fire, but once again, very unique, and I've enjoyed it. It's been very informative for me in that regard too, even though there's been some challenging times. And I've also been the president of a Boudreaux Memorial Foundation that we set up about 25 years ago with the idea to provide funding for children-oriented charities. So people kind of say, why do you do all this stuff? Well, there were many things that drove me towards this path in my life. My upbringing, it was always important that we somehow gave back. I think it's important that volunteerism is great within towns because I think it's really the cornerstone. The town government can only do so much. It's really built off of the efforts of the community themselves. Always felt like it was important to give back. We're all very fortunate in so many ways. So there are always people that need something that we take for granted. So I think that's important. And for our children, it was important that they understand that it's a good life lesson to give back, to always help others. And I feel very strongly that giving is way more fun than receiving. So I've always found that to be an important thing and something that I found very gratifying. So the challenge is, how do you foster volunteerism? Sometimes I feel like you move in the same pack. It's the same people volunteering. Catherine and I are on three different boards together. So we're a perfect science experiment in regards to that. So there are a lot of people that you see moving around, but how do you broaden it beyond that base that is so incredibly dedicated? And how do you get them to catch that bug? Because it is a bug, and I think people are kind of hesitant to do it because they don't think they have the time to do it. But once you get into it, you realize how incredibly positive of an experience it is. But it's how do you get them started to get that taste? So you can do a lot of advertising. You could set it up as a requirement for membership in certain sports organizations. I'm not sure that's the best way of doing it. Because you don't want to force people to volunteer. You want them to volunteer, but some people don't really realize how gratifying it can be. So if you just get a small sample of it, hopefully they get hooked on it at that point in time. And you can do friendly sort of volunteer competitions and things of that sort. So, I am a huge component or a proponent of volunteerism. I think it makes great communities, and Wakefield has been a very great community to me and my family. And for me, it's a great way of thanking them and giving them back as well. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. I think now we have Barrett.
Thank you, Mike. You covered a lot of things that I feel and a lot of things that that I see. It's funny, the first line of fostering community spirit. I think volunteerism fosters community spirit. Community spirit isn't a logo, or it isn't roots, or it isn't history. It's what you get when you join a volunteer, organization, a volunteer group that has a mission, a goal, something that you believe in, something that you see. And the community spirit is the energy you get when you work in a volunteer position, and it's the energy you get from the people that you're around and you're working with to accomplish something, to make what you think something in your community is better. The volunteerism thing for me, it's I get more back from the connections. I get more learning from the people I am working with. People look at volunteering like you're giving back. I think when you're volunteering, you learn, and it ties into, some of Catherine's stuff with the lifelong learning. I think when you volunteer, it is lifelong learning, because you're interacting with people you might not have. I mean, there are so many different organizations in Wakefield you can volunteer for. And, just, in the breakout rooms, I hear people say things, and you want to reach out and say, hey, that's a great thought. There's probably a place for you to volunteer where you can foster that, where you can help develop that, you can help promote that. The volunteer piece in Wakefield, there are hundreds of opportunities, and it's up to, there's 40 people in this room, 40 people listening to this. It's up to groups like that who are here to kind of promote volunteerism, to promote the stuff like that. It's not giving back. You're improving. You're pushing your community forward. So it's going back to myself. The commitment to volunteering helps me understand the people in my community. It's more connections. So on the BB note, as we recruit people, and you try and recruit people to volunteer, and volunteers help the community run, the BB is trying to put together a calendar of volunteer opportunities. I mean, it's an enormous task, but having a path like that and access, and people in this room promoting it. I mean, that's volunteerism, and that's community spirit to me. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Oh, go ahead, Carlos, sorry.
So take it away. We're about to break out again, I think.
So we are about to break out again. It is almost that means we will be going a little bit over. I'll try to bring us back at around 5 or 6 after. So this will be a short breakout. If you do need to leave, please feel free to take off at 9 or whenever. Totally understand, because we have had your attention since the last 2 hours. We really appreciate it. So I just posted the facilitation questions in the chat, and I am about to open the breakout room, same as the last 3 times. So by now you know the deal. All right, thanks everybody. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. Thank you for that. That was pretty good. I think right now we're going to have, if that's right, Councillor Chines.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. And I think it's fitting that we ended on volunteerism as a topic, because all of you have been so gracious and generous with your time tonight to volunteer your thoughts, your insights, and your ideas in this discussion. So thank you very much for doing that. The feedback that we've gathered through this process has been just extraordinary, and tonight was no exception. Do want to thank again Christian and Carlos for their great work, Erin and Jen as well, all of the committee members. Do want to acknowledge two of my colleagues from the Town Council who were on tonight as well, Marion Button and Dennehy, for their support and contributions. And really just want to close tonight by leaving you with some homework. A lot of our discussions were cut short tonight because we had such great topics, but there is a chance to get your voice heard again. Please log on in the next 3 weeks and take our online survey. And please share that survey with 2, 3, 4, 5 of your friends and neighbors and ask them to do the same. The more responses we get, the more robust that feedback is going to be as we put this all together in the next step. And so would love to have some strong participation in that. So thank you again, everyone, for all your participation and great ideas. These 3 forums, I feel like I've ended the evening more energized than I was at the start, and tonight was no exception. So thank you again for everything. And unless we have any closing thoughts from Carlos, I think we'll close it out.
Thank you.
Just want to thank everyone. It was a great discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Good
night.
everyone.
Thank you, WCAT, too.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, WCAT. Thank you, everybody.